I just contacted John, who's my guest today from Male Victims of Female Narcissists. I was saying that we had a pop-up live last week from sunny and beautiful Colorado, which is now under snow because our friend in common, Tracy Malone, lives there. And so we did it from her porch. There he is. Okay, good. John, I see you. All right. Anyway, so we're coming back to that is based on a post that John made recently about how narcissists, when you end a relationship with them, they'll often take, there you go, your
Hi there.
friends and family too.
I made it.
Hi. Good. I was like, where is he? I'm sitting here talking to
Yeah.
myself. All right.
Sorry about that. I was looking, waiting for the live thing, and it didn't show. So, how are you, my friend?
Good. Good to see you. So last time we saw each other was like a week and a half ago.
Yeah.
In beautiful Colorado with our friend Tracy Malone. And now I'm freezing with a heater on my feet.
It's even cold here in Atlanta. I mean, full blown winter mode here. I went from doing my daily jog in just a pair of shorts to being bundled up and like that within 2 days time. So it's been colder here than it has been all this time. So
I know.
I know. So I can't imagine New York. Yeah.
So I know. So I was saying how now it's November and the holidays are coming up, and one thing that our people in our community are suffering from are those events with family, because even though you think it's just you who's had your friends and family members taken away by your ex, that it's not, that this is a really common problem.
It's
People
not.
feel so ashamed.
Oh, yeah.
They feel like, oh, no one can, everyone's going to think something's wrong with me because my ex is actually having Thanksgiving with my own family and no one will talk to me anymore.
Yeah.
So I know you're an expert on this topic, so let's just jump into it.
Yeah, I've had a little bit of that happen. The bad news is that if you're still in a relationship with a narcissist, they love to mess up holidays for you in some way, shape, or form. And if you're not in relationship with a narcissist, they love to mess up the holidays for you in some way, shape, or form. So it's a very trying time, I think, particularly for those people who've lost family members through the process, and that's family or close friends, which winds up, I think, being most of us. Through the process of divorcing or leaving a narcissist, that it can be a truly lonely time if you don't make some preparations, that's for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say one thing that we know, especially because you know, and anyone who knows us know that we really focus on the niche thing of going through the family court system. And the topic of the book that we're working on now has to do with how narcissists and toxic abusers start turning the kids against you, but it starts while you're still in the relationship. That's something you have to watch out for.
You know, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so let's start talking about how they do it so insidiously they start turning not just your children, but friends and family against you while you're still together. Because I remember something I found out later, my ex was telling a friend of mine. I'm like, what? But I'll let you go.
Yeah,
first.
you know, this was probably the hardest revelation for me through the whole thing. I realized when I told her I wanted to divorce, that I realized that she had been communicating with my children negatively about me for a really long time. I told her I wanted a divorce, and she said, just so you know, some of your kids will never forgive you and will never want to be in touch with you. And in my mind, everything went, like I had done everything I could personally to try and keep our problems away from the children. I didn't discuss it with them. I did my best, which I'm probably not so good at, to act like there were no problems. We didn't try to, I tried particularly not to fight in front of the children as well. And I thought, and wrongfully so, that what's going on is a problem between two adults and that we'd handle those things together. And what I discovered in that moment was that she had handled it with the children a long time prior, and have been having communication with them for a really long time. So what took place in the days that unfolded beyond that was, and again, hindsight's 2020. Also, I should have understood this before, and I didn't.
Nobody.
I knew that I felt alienated.
Nobody. Why should you have understood? Like, who would ever think that this is happening?
Yeah, I mean, people divorce all the time, and I think even sometimes healthy and mature people divorce, and they always champion the other spouse, even in a divorce, even in the if you've got a couple of healthy people, they go, this doesn't work for us, but that doesn't mean I'm going to go trash you to your children, and I didn't think that would ever happen, and that was my own being naive. And looking back now, I felt alienated from my own family. Like there was triangulation going on, where instead of my kids talking to me, they would talk to her directly, and then it wound up, and I just didn't realize that was from the smear campaigning and the distrust that my ex had of me. So what I discovered was that however your narcissist spouse feels about you, they will do everything they can, subtly and overtly, to give that to your children. So one of the key qualities of a narcissist is they don't trust anybody. They don't trust. They're untrustworthy, so they assume everybody else is trustworthy too.
They're not trustworthy, so therefore they don't trust anyone.
So they will. That's one of the first things they will absolutely give to your kids, and try to work it around you. And they eliminate the conversation between you and your children, because again, they're the only trustworthy ones. So she can deal with dad instead of me having to deal with dad. And it's assuming, and they do this very well, and they exclude you from the relationship. Then you get divorced like I did, and surprise, now you realize this smear campaign has been going on for a decade with your children. And my kids are older, they're adults now. So I discovered that later. And when I went to talk to each of them about the divorce, each one of them I spoke with divulged information about conversations I had had with my ex that were private, that nobody would have known except for me and her. And I know I didn't tell my kids what was going on. So there's only one other person who could have done that, which was her. And of course it was all with her spin, and it was all with her understanding, and it was all smear campaign. So what I found was that I was alienated from my kids, where I had expected to be able to have a relationship with them, and I expected her to say, you know what, just because it didn't work out between us, you always have a father, and I want to encourage that relationship with your dad. And I don't think that happens. I think it's very passive aggressive. Your dad is far from God, and he's abandoned us. That's the phraseology is, he didn't abandon me, because quite honestly, the relationship that went upside down was mine and hers. That's the relationship I think should have been the focus. But the conversation, I'm certain, is, well, he abandoned us. He abandoned our family. And they get in this little huddle, and again, they smear campaigned you for years. They get in this little huddle together, and they alienate you. Now, that doesn't work quite so well with younger children. Generally speaking, with younger kids, people I've talked to and consulted with, the narcissist is hardcore smear campaigning the victim pretty specifically. I've seen, in fact, truly aggressive smear campaigning. Some kind of kidnap the kid and head out, and then they have to deal with the court system. In fact, I sent somebody to talk to you about that yesterday, who's having that exact issue, and was hoping you could help them. Some have involved the courts in another way. They will lie about the victim and involve the courts in that way, and get child services on them and try to remove the relationship that way. So narcissists can be very passive in it and covert, kind of like mine was, or they can be very aggressive and hard at it. I mean, I know people who are millions of dollars in debt trying to defend themselves in the court system from the lying accusations of a narcissist.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the holidays. So it can be really problematic.
Yeah. So let's say, like, not just the kids. I mean, that's the thing I'm really interested in. But what about when it's like your parents? So it's not the kids. When do you think this stuff starts? Because we see it. I mean, we see it. It's pretty common with our people in our community where the abusive ex-spouse somehow has manipulated the family, so they end up saying to someone like our client, well, I think you're the one that's the problem.
Yeah, I think what you described there may be the difference between a malignant or an overt narcissist. And just to define really quick, an overt or a malignant narcissist is the kind of narcissist you can spot across the room or a half mile away. Some presidents we might know, if they were diagnosed, would be diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. And that's probably a good example of a malignant narcissist. You can spot them across the room. The advantage to having one of those is normally, I think, the parents figure that out and can side with the victim if the victim is malignant. And I have parents talking to me pretty routinely about and grieving over the narcissism of the daughter-in-law or son-in-law who's married into the family, and they're hoping their kid gets out. And it's interesting. So these people who are malignant, generally, I think the parents figure that out. Now, the covert narcissists is another thing entirely, and they work so far under the radar. It's very subtle, and it's very quiet, and it's over a long period of time. And you can find yourself alienated from brothers and sisters. You can find yourself alienated from parents. And that was in my case. My family also used religion, Christianity, to try to destroy me as well, because they consider my having divorced a violation of religion or Christianity, and they don't want to talk to me about it. So because I did the divorcing legally, right? Then I'm the problem. But the narcissist is not the problem. When they've abandoned a relationship or married into a relationship, they had no intention of loving you or participating in a marriage anyways. It really is a marriage of use and abuse more than anything else. So I personally, when I look at my life, I think that the narcissist actually does the divorcing first. We call that the discard in narcissist circumstances, where basically they kind of abandon you either emotionally or physically. We're gone. It can happen generally during the first year, but sometimes more often than that. My ex personally told me that she emotionally abandoned our relationship 3 months into the marriage. Now, she didn't tell me that until she told me that in a therapy session 20 years later. And although I talked to her about these things, she didn't own it till far later. But that to me, when you discard somebody you're in a relationship with, whether you're married or not, the discard is the divorce. You just go, okay, we're not really doing a relationship anymore. So as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to religion and Christianity and not divorcing, the legalities of it are present because of a relationship. And if the relationship is gone, that's really the divorce. Somebody says, I'm just not going to go do this anymore, like a narcissist does when they discard you, and it's done. In my particular case, that was used against me because my parents would see it more as a legal thing than anything else. They think that's the divorce. So either way, you can be alienated from parents that way and siblings, and I've lost both my parents and my sisters through that. Now, we weren't close before either, so there's that too. It's hard to feel like I lost much because there really wasn't a bond there anyways, which is maybe the reason they didn't look for more.
What was your ex's relationship like with your family before the divorce? Was she really close to your sisters and your parents?
My parents were, I think, very warm and loving towards her and treated her like a daughter in a way that she probably had never been treated before.
Mm.
So they embraced her completely. And looking back, I saw the same kind of triangulation begin with my parents. I would find out things through my ex that my parents didn't communicate to me. Like my parents were planning to retire, and were making plans about it. I found that out through my ex and did not find that out from my parents. So
So it's like these people, like they inject themselves between two, you and other family members, and they make
correct.
themselves almost like the
Yeah.
gatekeeper of the information. Like
Yep.
I'll let, like, it's like they kind of schmooze
Yeah.
with your
And they
family.
become the primary communicator as well for you, instead of you. And this happens over time, so you really kind of don't realize it's going on. Where you don't think of it. My ex had said, "Oh, well, your parents are thinking about retiring. They're thinking about moving." I'm like, "Oh, wow. Well, I talked to them today, and your mom was telling me." But so you don't make much of it until it's kind of done, and you go, "Oh, wait a minute. I'm over here, and she doesn't talk to me anymore. These conversations are not happening where they should happen." So you kind of don't understand it all till really you see the big picture.
But that
And for
triangulation too, I'm thinking of how it makes someone like you or someone like us feel. It's like this exclusivity. Like, oh, it's
100%.
me and these people that are supposed to be close to you, but they can't really be close to you because they're closer to
Correct.
me because they're telling me things, and you're left out.
Yep.
So it's us against
Yeah.
you. And something you're saying is something I want to mention, that again,
It's
like,
middle school on steroids, right? The
yeah,
clicks and the stuff like that goes on,
right.
except it's in your own home. It's with your own family, and can be with the biological relationships, and friendships that are outside of your family that are most important.
Yeah, and because we're learning more and more as we're researching for this current book about when parents or people try to turn kids in particular against the other parent, it's something that we've been working on really educating our clients on, not just like custody factors, but on something we call the alienation factors based
Yeah.
on a model by Dr. Amy Baker. Like, what exactly does it mean? Because we know, there's junk science and there's a lot of controversy surrounding the topic, but the fact is that we see it all the time in
Hmm.
domestic violence situation, and especially when there's an end to a relationship, that abuser is left with three options instead of the day-to-day abuse. And I say this all the time, they're limited to money, the courts, and your kids.
Yeah.
So if you're in a legal battle, they still can get at you through that. But then they just have the kids. And so they weaponize the kids
Totally.
against you. So we want our clients in our community to be very aware of what this means, like what this looks like. So for
Hmm.
example, we had a conversation with a client earlier, and this comes up often, where the person says, well, my kids really don't want to see their other parent right now. And still the beginning of the divorce. So I think I'm going to tell him that they don't want to see him. I said, no, you don't want to do that. You can't do that, because by you doing that, not only do you open yourself up to an alienation case against you,
Totally.
but
Yep.
you are basically and because our client, she didn't realize this, because she's like,
Yeah.
I want to be the one to tell him. I said, you're looking like a gatekeeper because you're getting in the middle. So if your kids don't want to go see that other parent, that's between them and the other parent and a therapist, but not for you to get
Correct.
in the middle of. And people have a hard time accepting that. But that's something
Yeah.
I think should be made very clear. Like, your children's relationship between each parent is separate. That's their relationship with that
Correct.
person. And even though your intentions may be good, of like, I want to, honor my kid's feelings, that kid still has to learn in the real world, starting with that parent. They have to navigate that relationship. I'm not saying they should be with an abusive person on their
Yep.
own, but you as their parent should not inject yourself
Completely.
in the middle of that relationship. You should get a
Completely.
therapist. You should get other professionals that are neutral to protect yourself, and also to make sure your kids are not feeling what's called loyalty conflicts, because a lot of these things happen inadvertently also.
Yeah.
Not to take any
Yeah.
blame off your ex for what she did, but I think people start off without realizing, like, they're just like, I want to honor my kids' feelings, but there's certain things that we all have to learn as people. Like, we have to learn how to deal with other
Yeah.
people. We can't have somebody in the middle speaking for us. Like we
Yep.
all need to learn how to advocate for ourselves, including children of a certain age and their parents, because this is the kind of thing that could happen. Like relationships can be destroyed.
Totally. And when somebody says, well, the kids don't want to go over there, you have to ask the question, who's the parent here sometimes as well. I mean, you're the tones you set with respect to a divorced spouse largely are set the tone for how your kids are going to treat them. And you have to understand that. A good example of that would have been, for my first Father's Day, after I divorced, I didn't hear from any of my kids, not a word, not even a text. And I know what happened was what you described. It was, well, you know what, you don't have to talk to your father if you don't want to, which is very passive aggressively going, don't talk to him. Instead of parenting and going, you know what, he is and will be your dad. He has been, is, and will be your dad for the rest of your life. And he's worthy of that conversation and respect. And you need to go do that and encourage that relationship rather than discourage it, whether passively or aggressively. And it's a lack of parenting. And those people who are divorcing, particularly in a situation with a narcissist, it could never be more important to make sure that you parent well and that you lead your kids through this. As a victim, it's very easy to want to go, you know what, I'm not going to allow them to go hang out with the narcissist spouse. Well, first off, your kids don't understand it all the way you do. And if the narcissist is physically abusive to the kids, that's another thing. We're not talking about physical abuse here. If they're just miserable people, you don't want to be in a position where, as a victim, you're even discouraging that, because you don't want to set the tone for your children in the days ahead. They will discover they're really narcissists. Guess what? Your kids will discover this for themselves as they grow up. But you don't want to be the person giving them that in any way, shape, or form. And interestingly enough, the one piece of advice where advice for narcissistic abuse in kids and parenting is and can be all over the map. There is one piece of advice I got that was consistently the same from all of the professionals I talked to, all the people who I talked to who'd been through it, and anybody who was kind of in the psychology arena. And it was this: the person who parents well in the long run wins the kids. That the kids will figure it all out in time. And if you continue to be the good parent you are to your children and help lead them through this, and parent them well, they will figure it out in the end, and that person will win. So I've made it my business. I don't speak a negative word about my ex anywhere to my children. We don't have those conversations. I don't talk to them about the past. I don't talk to them about what happened. If they were interested, I'd talk at a kind of macro level, and it wouldn't be details. Why? Because it's none of their business, and it was between my ex and myself. But you don't often see narcissists playing by these same rules. They will absolutely alienate you. They will absolutely do it passive aggressively. They will absolutely do it aggressively. They will use every edge they can possibly have and do to keep you from your children and make holidays and other things miserable.
Yeah, like I'm thinking, I did a post maybe like, I don't know, a month ago about the one thing that you should not say to your kids during a custody battle, which is basically like a divorce in our world. And
Sure.
It was about like, sweetie, if you feel unsafe at your dad's house, you can call me. And I got so much flack for it about safety. And I said, safety is not the issue. The issue is you saying to your child, if you feel unsafe at dad's house, call me. People don't understand when you say something like that, you're basically inserting a message. There's a reason you should feel unsafe at dad's house. It's not about safety.
Correct.
It's like,
correct.
You don't, that's an insidious form of emotional, like it can be looked at as emotional abuse, because you're putting something in someone's head that they'd
absolutely.
be like, why would I?
Planting
If
the
they
seed.
feel unsafe, they'll feel unsafe. And also, just to clarify that, by saying to your child, if you feel unsafe anywhere, call me, that's fine. That's a totally different message. But by saying something before a child goes to the other parent's house, especially when you're in the middle of a custody case, you can be hit with an alienation case because you are putting messages into your kid's head, whether you realize it or not. Like your own stuff is coming out, and you have to be careful. If it's a real case of abuse, like we said, that's a whole other conversation. But
and narcissists
need to
are going,
understand
and you have the right word. Narcissists are going to make every effort to weaponize your children. You know, they're just going to do that, and you need to expect. I was naive, and I just didn't realize that was happening, and probably not read up on it enough at the time, and got a harsh reality and a harsh discovery when that took place. So you have to expect it. If your kids don't want to connect with you for seemingly no reason whatsoever, there is a reason, and it's that your narcissist spouse has alienated you and has worked hard at smear campaigning you and talking badly about you, whether passively or aggressively, and the kids don't want to connect with you. The hope I have, and for those of you who are parents out there who are disconnected from your kids, the majority, I'm disconnected from the majority of my kids. The hope is that one day they really kind of do figure out the insidious nature of it. I hope that my kids are in that process right now. And I pray and I wait for them to come back, but they need that understanding. It's not an understanding you can give them. And that's also alienation. It would be very easy for me to go, okay, well, mom did this or mom did that and mom did this and mom did that. And this is what you have to look out for. And to begin to do that. And you're painting this picture inside your kids' heads where they're going, oh, well, mom, something's wrong with them. And you really do wind up alienating them. Keep adult things between adults and don't give your own pain or your own perspective to your children. They have to discover it for themselves, as painful as it might be.
Yeah, I have two things I always, during these interviews, I'm always like jotting all kinds of things down. First of all, we've done a few interviews with a woman named Dawn Brower. Yeah. Her handle on Instagram is Secure Babies, and she specializes in attachment. And she talks a lot about the bond that is formed from when a child is born till when they're about 7 years old. And she said, if you had a strong relationship with your child from those formative years, that remains in their memory. Yep. And there's always the opportunity to reconnect again. And so just try to remember that. It takes a lot of work when kids have been separated. A psychologist I interviewed recently, he called it poisoning the well. Like when one parent has poisoned the well, it takes a lot of work to try to get them back. And that's stuff we're going to be doing a lot more content on too. But that you have to remember, they have those memories of that close relationship with you when they were little, that those never go away. Yeah. That's why sometimes people say with kids who have been adopted in those first couple of years, if they were abused or neglected, that can really impact their future. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to say about how, let's say one parent is saying terrible things about you to a child or a teenager. If when the child comes to you, if they still see you and they tell you, one parent, dad said this about you, mom, and blah, 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 blah. If you come back and just try to correct it by saying that's not true, this is what it really is, you might not realize you're doing the same thing that the abuser is doing, because the abuser is saying, this is what the truth is, this is what you need to think. And you're doing the same thing. This is what the truth is, this is what you need to think. And nobody is helping the child. First of all, no one's honoring that child's experience or thoughts, but nobody's also helping that child develop critical thinking skills.
Correct.
So for example, if an abuser is saying bad things about you, one thing to try is when the child parrots it back to you, dad says blah, 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 is to say, wow, like, what do you think about? Like, pause, not just get triggered. Correct. And, oh my gosh, that's so wrong, I got to fix it, because that's not going to work. Correct. You're doing the same thing, but to say, what do you have to say? Let's process that. Yep. Do you think that? Have you seen me do things like that? Not to correct and give them the truth, because it doesn't work. Correct. So there's a lot of things that I think people can learn about how to respond when children are being turned against them, instead of just getting triggered by thinking, oh my gosh, my ex is so toxic. How is my kid going to see it? I got to make sure they know the truth. It doesn't work. You're dealing with a person who's being brainwashed. Like you think about people in cults somebody coming at them, telling them the truth doesn't get them out of the cult, right?
Correct.
It doesn't make it stop. It's like there's other things that it takes longer, and it's a more involved process.
Yeah.
People seem to think, oh, I'll just tell them the truth and they'll believe me over the other person, and
yeah,
it's rough.
There's this story in the Bible, and this is not meant to be preaching in any kind of way, but that has helped me. And basically it's the story of the prodigal son, where the guy's got two sons, and the younger son goes off and he asks for his inheritance early, and dad for some reason gives him the cash, and he goes off and blows it on hookers and things like that. And the kid, when he's out of money, and he's blown everything, he's feeding pigs in a field, the Bible says, and it says, and then he came to his senses. And that's what I'm waiting for with my kids. I can't give them the understanding that they need. They have to have this aha moment where they go, oh, I get it now. And I trust my own judgment in what I've done, and leaving her and understanding who she was and taking the time and trying to help her and working through this process with her. What I understand is not wrong. And it's going to be obvious to them at some point in time. And I really do believe there will be some, oh, okay, I get it now. Now I understand why dad couldn't do this anymore and why he had to go. And all that alienation, I think in the long run, I'm hopeful, backfires on the narcissist. That's what I think ultimately happens, because the kid goes, wait a minute, you tried to keep me from my dad, or you tried to keep me from my mom. And most of the people I've spoken with who've been in these situations, sometimes takes more time than you would like. I'm 3.5 years in, I'm still alienated from my kids. Good therapists I've spoken with who kind of specialize in this say sometimes it takes 10 years. I'm going, oh my God, that's such a long time. I don't know if I can hold out that long, because I want to be waiting for them, and loving when they kind of return. That's my goal, when they have this moment where they come to their senses and they realize, oh my God, this is what happened. I want to be available and present for that,
Yeah, it's interesting because this topic comes up all the time with our clients, and we spoke to someone a few weeks ago who had been, his daughter is around 11, so she's still fairly young.
Yeah.
They were supposed to have, they're in the process of a divorce. The agreement was she was supposed to see him regularly, and for typical reasons she was withheld, and there were orders that she was supposed to see him, and the ex showed up and was like, she doesn't want him, we're not going to do it. So he's been heartbroken for months, and he was talking to a close family member, and the close family member said, look, you're just going to have to learn to go on without your daughter, because this is too heartbreaking. And so he was really torn, like, this is so awful, I'm just going to have to accept it and just move on with my life. But from the experts that we've spoken to, that's, even though it feels like you should give up, you should never give up.
Totally.
Because, for a few reasons. First of all, if you stop trying, that child gets the message that you don't care. So all of those poisonous messages that you don't care, that's what they're saying. You don't care. You don't love him. Look, he's not here. He's abandoned us all. You are showing that you don't when you give up and you stop making the effort. And someone told me a story about how every week, like a father would go to the door. He was supposed to pick up the kid for visitation, and the family would be behind the door and they'd never answer, and he'd keep knocking, and the kid was at the top of the stairs knowing that they were never going to be allowed to see their father, but the dad still came every week, would knock, wait, turn away, and go back. Yeah. And eventually he gave up, and when the daughter got older, they said, how do you feel? And she said, even though when my dad stopped coming, it was heartbreaking, because even though I knew I'd never be able to see him, it was still a signal every week that he still loved me, like he still cared. And then when he stopped coming, it felt like he didn't care anymore.
Yeah.
So your efforts are being noticed, even if you are being withheld. The other reason to not give up.
The most painful position to be put in. I mean, to go and to reach out and to constantly just be rejected for whatever reason, and normally again it's the smear campaign of the and the alienation of the narcissist with your children. But to put yourself in that place is just excruciating.
Right.
It's just excruciating.
Right. And
that's really good. That's a
thing,
really good word.
Yeah, it is excruciating. And the other thing to remember as you are trying to see a child who is at another parent's house who is poisoning them against you is to know that that child is kind of stuck when they're still in that location, because often they're being watched and tracked and listened to. And if they show happiness to see you while that other person can see them, then it's like a betrayal of the other parent.
Correct.
So they're really stuck. So it's almost
Correct.
like while they're being watched and tracked, they can't, even though it is excruciating. And you think, how could they not talk to me? How could they betray me? They're stuck. They're a victim too. It doesn't feel like it.
Yeah.
The other reason I started to say before as to why you shouldn't give up is because if your kids are in this situation being brainwashed by an unhealthy person and you go away, that's all they have.
Yep.
That's what they're left with.
That's really true.
One toxic
really true.
parent who is teaching them that this is the way the world works, is to manipulate, to lie, etc. So is that what you want to just leave your kids with? Just that one person?
Yeah, in a healthy situation, like we kind of talked about earlier, both parents are encouraging kids to continue to have relationship with the other parent. And in the weaponizing where you're not doing that, ultimately what's taking place is you are setting up boundary lines and you are setting up sides. And narcissists by nature are very controlling. They're also kind of very needy of supply, right? And in weaponizing, the kids kind of become supply. They kind of it becomes their team, their little holy huddle together, where they, again, dad's or mom has left us and we're together in this solidarity kind of thing. And if they reach out to the other parent, the narcissist would get horrifically offended and go and be challenged in it, because their team is being torn apart. And I think that's how they feel. So the kids are torn and they're in this situation where, well, if I love him, it shows her disloyalty or hatred, and that'll keep them out as well.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's the word, loyalty and disloyalty. And it's called the loyalty conflict, when it's like they're stuck in the middle. They're being put in the middle of something like this. Okay. Correct. I see a long question. I'm going to read it to you. Sure. I've been dealing with this for 4 years. I'm thinking about writing my girls a letter through email since my ex took away their phones. What should I say about not being able to see them as much?
My opinion is two things. I love you and I miss you. If you said those things, those are the kinds of things that melt a heart. And that just telling them that, and not even going any further. You don't have to describe why. You might utter I'm sorry that the divorce has hurt our relationship. You can say that, and I love you and I miss you, and I would love to be in relationship with you and see you. Yeah. That would be what I would say, and I wouldn't go any further than that. Again, be the good parent, be the bigger parent, be the one who raises the bar, and you live way above that thing, and you decide I'm not going to speak negatively of my ex, even if they're a narcissist. I will let them figure it out in time, and they can make their own judgments at some point in time when they really understand.
Yeah, and I should say one of the mistakes that I've seen made is when people are contacting their kids and they make it all about them. Like if my kids were withheld from me and I'm like, I'm so miserable, I'm so unhappy, that you're not talking to me, that doesn't help.
Yeah.
You have to make it about the kids. Like you said, I love you, I miss you, I love being your parent, I miss doing, one thing you can also do is remind them of things you did together in the past that was fun. It's fall again. I'm just thinking about how, we used to do this particular thing with the leaves or Halloween or something together. When you're ready, like, I'm always here for you. I'm always going to love you no matter what.
Totally. And understand also that that this sensibility, kids have to, again, that come to their senses moment is a process. And it's not, it may not necessarily be an event. They may kind of wake up one day and realize, but generally it's a process of experiencing the narcissist over time. I can see that already in my youngest, and the way my ex has been handling some of the things with her. She feels controlled and she feels judged, and I, when I appreciate when she talks to me about these things, and I have to be careful when I converse back that I'm not negatively talking about my ex, because she's asking for my advice and those kinds of things. And all I can do is say, here's how I would have handled this. And I can talk about my character and my heart and how I would have parented in that exact same situation, so that they know that I love them and that I care about them and that I'm not that, and that we are two distinct, uniquely different people. So they're not confused. But that's, again, it's good parenting through this for the win, and that's what I'm committed to. And for those of you out there who, it's excruciating that you are away from your kids. I hate it. It's painful. Father's Day and Thanksgiving and Christmas and those kinds of things. And I just wish with all my heart that I could just love on them, that these kinds of things were not present, but they are. So putting yourself out there in a place of vulnerability where they reject you again is hard. It's just hard. And I've wrestled through this. You talk about not giving up, and I'm going, oh, did I give up on this or did I give up on that? Because your words are right. You need to not give up on them. And it's hard to go do. For Christmas, I've got one of my 4 children who's pretty engaged with me. And it's like, okay, do I just invite her to dinner or do I invite all 4? Because it's if I put myself in, and they've been very clear, they don't want anything to go do with me. So if I even put that out there and I don't get a response back, or the response is negative, I've been rejected, and it's more pain. But I think you're right. I think it is an expression of love and an expression of a lack of abandonment that's probably really healthy. But it's the hardest thing to have to go do, to put yourself in that place constantly and say, I love you and I miss you. I love you and I miss you. I love you and I miss you. And then at the end, to be waiting with open arms when they return, because it can feel personal too. My kids are adults, and I would hope that they would understand some of this stuff by the time as they start to hit their late 20s and they start to hit their early 30s. They're grown-ass adults now, making their own decisions, and you would hope that I would hope that I poured in enough good stuff that they would kind of see it. And it's also hard as they get older not to take it personally. When the kids are younger, they're so easily manipulated. But actually, adult children can be just as easily manipulated and turned against you. But to put yourself in a position of vulnerability, to put yourself in a position of rejection, will take every ounce of energy you have to try and stay connected, and even more so if they are continually rejecting.
Yeah,
it's painful.
And of course, I wrote 3 things down when you were talking. The first is, and so some don't relate to the last thing you said, but they relate to what you said earlier. Again, like trying to remember, like it does, and I'm going to keep coming back to that word excruciating, like trying to remember that your kids are victims of domestic abuse as well. Emotional abuse, psychological abuse. Mm-hmm. That's what they're dealing with, and to try to have some compassion for that they are being abused also. It's you've been abused and they're still stuck. Correct. They're still, whether they're physically stuck in the house with that person because they're too young, or that they're adults and their minds have been poisoned. Mm-hmm.
And it's so frog in the kettle, right? And they're the frog. The heat on a lot of these kids has been turned on over a long period of time. And that's why if it happened in a moment, you could kind of combat it with a moment. You could explain, and they go, oh, well, I understand this moment. But because it was their life, because it happened over a long period of time, there's no one sentence or no one conversation you can have to undo the thousands and thousands of moments of smear campaign prior. And not just smear campaign verbally, but smear campaign in attitude, smear campaign in tone, smear campaign in respect, smear campaign in whether or not people think you're smart, or your spouse thinks you're smart or trustworthy or able or vulnerable. These kinds of there's so many of these nonverbal cues even that communicate to your children. To try and go back to explain is just pointless. They just don't get it, because the water's hot. They don't know it, and you do. And they're like, oh, well, I've been in this for years, splashing around,
It's normal.
having a good old time. And you think it's great. Mom's in here with us, right? We're safe. And the reality is, no, you're being cooked to death, and you don't even understand it. And it's hard to tell. You tell the frog to get out, and he ain't jumping.
Right. That's just like
time.
The truth. I'll tell you the truth. It doesn't mean that you're going to come out. Okay. So the other thing is, you mentioned about things like instantaneously changing. I have to say, just like a child who has been turned against another parent can happen just like a discard in a second, sometimes they come back and it's like nothing ever happened, which is really weird. We've seen it in our own personal experience, like children who have been turned away and then come back, and it's like it's bizarre. It's bizarre how it's like they forget and they just move on, and the relationship gets right back. And I've seen it in short term, like after a few months, and I've also seen it with a very close friend of mine where her 2 adult daughters were separated and kept from her for years, and all kinds of other details involved where she felt like they really, like her own daughters betrayed her. They came back and they told her, even though we didn't talk to you for all these years and our other parent was saying all these things, this is how we felt during that time. And it was incredible. Like it just snapped right back. So remember, it's not like just because it took a while for this to happen that it won't just snap back. It's not always, but sometimes you don't need to go and talk about everything that happened.
Absolutely.
Sometimes they just come right back. The other thing is, when you mentioned how one of your kids says sometimes they feel controlled or judged, and that is also an opportunity. The fact that they're telling you something like this, one of the things that we've learned is what everybody wants, everybody needs, is to feel listened. So even if they're coming to you and saying, you know what, Dad, I feel like you just control and judge me, instead of saying, that's not what I mean to do, be quiet and say, I don't want you to feel that way. Tell me why. Yeah. Tell me how I do that so I can learn, because I love you and I don't want you to feel like I'm doing that to you. And let them talk.
Yep.
Let them
without question.
Talk.
Yep.
Because think about how the other side, they don't allow them to talk. They don't care about their feelings because they don't have any empathy. They're coming at them. You need to do this. You need to do that. You need to feel this way. You show the contrast in how you respond to your children, whatever age, by saying, tell me, I'm here to listen to you. I'm not going to tell you that your feelings are wrong. You feel that for whatever reason, let's figure out why and let's get to it. Because sometimes when you question them, and this is part of helping them develop critical thinking skills, they realize they don't really have a basis for it. But you're not going to get them to figure that out themselves by just saying, that's not fair. I'm not that kind of parent. You shouldn't be believing what the other side said. It's not going to work.
Yeah. It's easy. I'm all about kind of helping people. And some of these decisions have to be made really quickly when you're in a conversation, right? They are, okay, what am I going to do right here? So I've been thinking about, kind of, as you're talking about, like what are my boundaries here? What's the line for me? And for me, the line personally is, if I'm ever speaking about my ex, I'm perhaps in trouble. Particularly if it's unfavorable in any kind of way. The only time I will speak about my ex is in a historical context. Your mother and I used to do this with you when you were kids. I want them to help. I want to try and remind them of the good stuff. Your mother and I used to do this with you. We used to do this with you. We did this together. We did that together. And I speak in a historical context and only favorably. If you're ever speaking of the other parent negatively, passively or aggressively, you're in danger of reframing your kids against them, and it's the wrong place for you to be.
Right. It's your relationship with your kids. This is between you and your children.
And perhaps the future, it also, if you're constantly bad at that, it can negatively affect, I think, your future with your children in the long run. It really can. Again, they're not dumb. They do figure this out. Most of them do. I've talked to enough kids who have kind of come out on the other side of this, and they go, yeah, I kind of understand now why this has happened. They're not mine, but I'm hopeful that that same process will take place with my kids. But that's the line. If you're ever talking about your ex, whether they're narcissists or not, you have to be really careful about the words you say. And if you're speaking negatively, you're on the wrong side of what you need to communicate whatsoever.
Yeah.
Be the parent. Talk about yourself. Talk about how you might handle the situation. Talk about your love. Talk about these kinds of things so that they understand more who you are, but do not speak negatively about the other spouse, no matter what. One of the other things I was thinking of as we were chatting is that this whole process for the victim, particularly your parent, if your kids are alienated from you, or your parents are alienated from you, or your sisters, or whatever it might be, it can be a very gaslighting experience. Because I know that there have been days in my mind, I've racked what did I do? What was, I never struck my kids. I rarely raised my voice. What did I do that warrants this alienating behavior? What's the big moment? And for me, I just don't have those. I can't think of them. Now my kids probably.
No, that's just like in the relationship, I imagine.
Yep,
what did I do wrong? What do I need to do to fix it?
It really is, and it's kind of like it's kind of like when you're married to one, or in your relationship with one where there are kids involved. You've got one narcissist, and then as you get out of the relationship, they multiply. And we call them flying monkeys, but they kind of are mini narcissists because they're doing the bidding of the narcissist themselves. They're weaponized against you. They're hurting you. And you have to deal with this whole community of people rather than just the one. And it can be a very gaslighting experience. You go, what did I do? Maybe I did that. Maybe this was wrong. Maybe that was wrong. And it can drive you crazy. Because this smear campaign has worked so very well, you go, oh, I must be a really bad dad. Or I must have been a really, really bad mother for my children to have just abandoned me like this. No, you've not been a bad parent. You've been framed up by somebody else who thinks you're a bad human being, who had only your demise in mind from the beginning, and they've painted this picture and handed it to your impressionable children and said, this is your dad, or this is your mother. That's not about you. It's not about your parenting. It's not about your character. It's not about who you are. That's about another person having spoken negatively about you. So do not take these things to heart. Cease to go inside your head and to just ruminate over this and to try and discover all of these things, because if you've looked already, they're probably not there. And the only mitigating factor is another spouse who's turned them against you. That's it. It's all you have.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I'm sure you've heard of people who are like, I'm really scared. What if I'm the narcissist? It's like the fact that you are even reflecting on it and worried about it means you're probably not, because you care.
That's absolutely
you care about it.
A real narcissist would not even consider the fact.
Right.
You can tell them you're a narcissist, and they go, done, and they've already moved on.
Right.
There's no considering it whatsoever. The fact that you actually took the time to consider that. I remember saying it to a therapist. Maybe I'm the one. Because all this negative talk, all this negative talk, about you personally. And then at another level, when you're out of the relationship, they've taken it to another space where they're attacking your parenting. And looking back, my parenting was attacked long ago. You were talking about children earlier on, and babies and security and infants. And I thought, I felt like there's a power struggle even back then. My ex did not want me. I even addressed this. I go, why do I feel like there's a power struggle with this baby in our lives? I shouldn't feel that. It was always she was trying to win. And if you take that, again, this smear campaign, this attitude towards you started when they were younger and started far before you ever realized.
Oh yeah, and this is like a whole conversation I'm sure Chris would love to participate in. He's watching and commenting, but he can't talk now. But John, I think the hour has flown by again.
It's
Oh my
unbelievable
God.
that kind of time has passed.
I know.
So thank you guys for your comments and feedback. I know if you want to reach out to either Lisa or me, we respond to our own messages.
Yes.
So when you're PMing us, you're actually talking to us. So we're here to help however we can.
Yes, yes. And I'm sorry we're kind of ending abruptly, but you know how to find both of us.
Absolutely.
And we hope this has been helpful and you guys get through the holidays as best you can and don't give up on those kids.
Can I make one more statement real quick? This is on the other side of that. You may be in a situation where you're alienated from your parents and where you're alienated from your children. And let me give you a piece of advice. There are people who love you. There are people who care about you. There are people who love you like family. God's been gracious enough to me and to give me a surrogate dad who loves me like his son. In fact, calls me son. I've got friends who are like sisters to me and like brothers to me. And on holidays, be proactive in spending time with that family. Go be around people who love you. Your friends know what you've been through. They know this has been hard, but it will greatly help you through the holidays, through Thanksgiving, through Christmas and New Year's and all of that. Take the time even now. We're a couple months out still, It's early November. We got till the end of, we got 3 weeks or so before Thanksgiving. We've got almost a couple of months before Christmas and New Year's. Go be proactive in putting yourself in a place during the holidays to be around people who love you. I go to my best friend's house in Charlotte every year. He's got kids. He's got a wife.
Right?
Yeah, you met him. You met him.
Lovely, lovely.
Amazing. Person. And he stepped into my life in a way that he and his wife and kids are my surrogate family, where I don't have that experience a whole lot with my own children. He's gracious enough to lend me his family and to consider me a part of the family and involve me. So I make it my business to take the time to go up there and to go spend the time with them so that I feel loved and I feel cared for. And they buy me Christmas presents and I buy the family Christmas gifts as well. And I get the family experience. But that proactive nature can keep you from kind of just sitting around on Christmas or New Year's with your thumb up your ass, just going, oh, this is horrible, and feeling horrible about yourself. And let's be clear. Is it the same as having your own kids around? No. Is it the same as having your own family around? No. In some ways, it might be better because you don't have to deal with the nonsense of the narcissist and all this other stuff in these relationships. And in other ways, you may still miss your family, but you will not be alone. Right. And you will be surrounded by people who love you and care about you. And often the holidays particularly take a little proactivity on your part, to be in a place where you can find that love and find that friendship and find that connection. You got time enough to go do that right now. And I got to tell you, there isn't a one of your friends, if you didn't ask and say, hey, could I come have Thanksgiving with you? They're going to go, no. They understand what you've been through. Sure. People who care about you, they understand this. If not, find somebody that you can go do Thanksgiving with. Find somebody you can go do Christmas with. Build a new relationship instead of sitting around sulking, because that's part of getting your life back. And it's part of living and keeping yourself out of those holes in life that can so get you down. So please be proactive about those kinds of things. Find a place to go. Find somebody who loves you. Find somebody to hang out with. Invite somebody over if you're going to spend it by yourself. Do whatever it takes. Don't be by yourself. Be around people that care about you and that you can interact with.
Absolutely. I love how you added that for last. That's excellent.
It's important, Thank you, my friend. Yeah. We've talked about continuing to do some of these here and there as well, and I always look forward to that. My best to Chris, and give him a squeeze for me and tell him I said hello. And I hope you guys are well, and we'll talk soon, I'm sure.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. All right. Thanks again,
So
John.
long. All right. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.